Hello and welcome to Oak Grove Film and Media. This video is focusing on the complicated nature of regulation in the newspaper industry. We won't cover Livingstone and Lunn and regulation theory in this video, but we have a video for that here. Regulation is the rules that are imposed and how control is maintained, e.g. to avoid collusion and raising prices. So that is, two large conglomerates or large companies coming together, merging, and therefore raising the prices of products or services to extortionate levels to the point where we as the consumers have no choice but to pay it. So that regulation forbids those things from happening. The regulation is also there to protect audiences while also trying to offer the choice to consume whatever we wish. So that fine line between us wanting something but it perhaps not being so good for us. For example, watching really violent things. But if we want that, we should be able to consume that. But then regulation is also there to protect us. So it's a bit difficult, which is all what Livingstone and Lunt's theory is about, which we'll get to. Sometimes it's not actually facts that are reported, but it's actually the opinions of journalists and editors. This is known as bias. So you, as media students, need to be very, very aware and hyper-vigilant of the bias being reported in newspapers, and you need to develop that critical analysis skills to be able to decipher what perhaps is facts and what perhaps is more influenced by the opinions of journalists and editors. Because of the influence that newspapers have and the fact that they aren't completely regulated, it is why newspapers need to have some sort of regulation, but it's very difficult, which we're going to uncover in this video. Because when there is a lack of regulations, issues are very likely to arise. As a media student, again, you are expected to know about the phone hacking scandal. The News International phone hacking scandal centred around the now closed News of the World and other British newspapers owned by Rupert Murdoch. Journalists at these papers were involved in phone hacking, bribing police, and wielding their influence to get stories. From 2005 to 2007, investigations uncovered that newspapers targeted celebrities, politicians, and British royal family members through phone hacking. In July 2011, it was further revealed that victims included murdered schoolgirl Millie Dowler, families of deceased British soldiers, and victims of the 7th of July 2005 London bombings. The public was outraged. This led to significant resignations. Rupert Murdoch resigned from the News Corporations Board, his son James resigned as executive chairman, and the Dow Jones CEO Les Hinton also resigned. News International legal head Tom Crone and CEO Rebecca Brooks all resigned following the backlash of this phone hacking scandal. Facing advertiser boycotts, the News of the World shut down on the 10th of July 2011 after 168 years. Then, on 6th of July 2011, Prime Minister David Cameron initiated the Leveson Inquiry, which examined the phone hacking, police bribery, and the overall ethics and practices of British press. He also announced that the Press Complaints Commission, the PCC, would be completely overhauled. Cameron also launched the Leveson Inquiry, which was a public inquiry into the practices, culture and ethics of the British press. A public inquiry is a major investigation governed by a government minister that can be gifted special powers to compel testimony and the release of other forms of evidence. The only justification required for a public inquiry is the existence of public concern about a particular event or set of events. Inquiries have addressed topics as wide-ranging as transport accidents, fires, the mismanagement of pension funds, self-inflicted deaths in custody, outbreaks of disease and decision-making that's led to war. Other British public inquiries included the Grenfell Tower Inquiry, the Independent Blood Inquiry and the COVID-19 Inquiry. So, what were the findings from Leveson's inquiry? Despite regulation of the press, there was clear evidence that ownership of a paper is linked to the political influence and its affiliations. The power of the press to shape political events is evident on a daily basis and reflected frequently in the content of front covers. Two really good examples of this would be, number one, the 2016 Brexit referendum. As I'm sure you would know, there were strong different opinions on either side whether to leave or to remain in the EU, the European Union. Many papers opted to leave, many papers opted to remain, so wanted to push their readers to either vote for leave or remain. Leveson essentially saying that the press has a lot of power to shape these political events, so whether we should leave, whether we should remain. Another example would be the fact that as a point in time, as I'm recording this video, we are in the run-up to a 2020-24 2024 general election on the 4th of July initiated by Rishi Sunak. Right now, the front pages are absolutely filled with so many different interpretations of whether Rishi Sunak should be voted for, whether Keir Starmer should be voted for, or who else. So Levinson essentially said that the press has incredible power to shape political events. I highly recommend that you have a watch the BBC documentary The Rise of the Murdoch Dynasty on BBC iPlayer, as long as you have a TV licence, of course. Here's a clip of Murdoch being grilled during the Levinson inquiry.
Politicians. He'd simply talked politics or family stuff with prime ministers through the decades.
I've never asked a prime minister for anything. You are completely oblivious to the commercial benefits to your company of a particular party winning an election. Absolutely. Is that really the position?
Yes, absolutely.
What did he recommend? He said that newspapers should continue to be self-regulated and government should have no power over what newspapers publish. You may want to think why, you may want to consider what the issues may be if governments have control over the newspapers. He said a new press organisation, standard organisation, with a new code of conduct should be created by the press industry. Legislation should be created to ensure that the new press standards organisation would be independent and effective in dealing with public complaints. He also said that the editor's code of practice should continue to be followed. However, before the Levinson inquiry, newspapers and editors were regulated by the PCC, which Cameron abolished or overhauled. The PCC stands for the Press Complaints Commission. After, however, it was replaced by IPSO. IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, now investigate complaints about the breaches of Editors' Code of Practice. But now we're falling into another rabbit hole. Who are IPSO? IPSO is an independent, as we said, independent press standards organisation. They're the largest independent regulator of the newspaper magazine industry in the UK. It was established on the 8th of September 2014 after the wind-up and the closing down of the PCC, which had been the main industry regulator since 1990. Sounds okay, right? Wait. IPSO are funded by their members. That means IPSO regulate the people they need to rely on for their funding. For a few seconds, consider, how is this beneficial for the industry, for society, for the fact that this company is regulated by the people that they're funded by the people they regulate. But how is this also quite problematic for society as well? Now, you may be thinking, how does this make them a trusted organisation if they are at risk of bias? Well, the campaign group Hacked Off for the exact same. The Hacked Off campaign was established in 2011 in response to the phone hacking revelations and a campaign for a free and accountable press for the public. They have a lot to say about IPSO and claim that IPSO is completely redundant as an organisation.
Not. You still don't like this new press regulator. It's a year in. Why not?
IPSO is a sham. It was set up by newspaper proprietors and editors under the guise of a rather secretive organisation called the Regulatory Funding Company, who basically are vested interests of the press. So they're acting really as judge, jury and executioner. So really it's not an effective independent regulatory body at all. And the public opinion reflects this in all the polls that have been done. 78% or upwards of that regard the Levinson inquiry as important, and not only that, but any regulatory body has to be Levinson compliant, and IPSO isn't that, and actually makes a point of claiming not to be.
They examined IPSO's 2020 rulings and found that it took almost 6 months on average for IPSO to reach a ruling complaints. Only 0.3% of complaints were ultimately upheld, and that more than 1,000 complaints were actually abandoned. They also found that corrections requested by IPSO were, on average, 7 times shorter than the article in breach of standards. There were 0 fines, 0 investigations, and 0 arbitration outcomes were reported, ever, according to them, not just for 2020. IPSO provided a rebuttal in which they claimed that a lot of comments made by Hacked Off was incorrect. What you may want to do is go to the IPSO website, have a look at the outcomes of the rulings and come to a conclusion yourself. Just add a spanner to the works, Let's take a look at this. The PRP, the Press Recognition Panel, was established by Royal Charter to ensure that regulators of the UK press are independent and properly funded. The Royal Charter ensures that the PRP remains wholly independent of any other body or influence. The Charter lists 29 criteria that regulators have to meet in order to be recognised. Not recognised by PRP, so let's have a look at IPSO, Direct IPSO. They are not recognised by the PRP, and they claim they do not tend to seek recognition under the Royal Charter. They actually use it as one of their sort of USPs, that we do not aim to seek recognition under the Royal Charter. There's over 90% of national newspapers are regulated by the IPSO, such as the Times, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Mail, the Sun, and many more. Because they are paid for by its members, they are still susceptible to influence. Hacks have called them sham and an illusion of reform. Other papers, such as The Guardian, The Independent, Financial Times, have actually declined to take part in IPSO. So, what do you think? Are IPSO a trustworthy organisation? Well, no worries. There's another UK regulator, Impress. Impress are indeed approved by the PRP. They're the first regulators to have proven its compliance with Leveson Inquiry. And membership consists of a variety of independent, local, investigative and special interest news publications across the UK. However, no national newspaper has signed up. So, we've talked regulation. How can we now apply this to our case studies? Let's start with the left-wing broadsheet, The Guardian. The Guardian opted out of membership of IPSO and Impress, citing the reasons that IPSO is unethical and that they had issues with the governance with the Royal Charter that impacted the freedom of press. It is also, The Guardian is the only British national daily newspaper to employ an internal ombudsman called the Reader's Editor to handle complaints and corrections. So if you did have an issue with something The Guardian has reported on, you go to the Reader's Editor, who would hope takes an unbiased look at your complaint. In the past, The Guardian has faced potential government action to regulate the paper's role as an investigative journalist and their aim to report fairly on information that is in public interest. So in 2013, The Guardian reported on the case of the whistleblower Edward Snowden, who leaks US National Security Agency and CIA surveillance disclosures which affected ordinary American citizens. Interestingly, the British government threatened The Guardian with legal action and closure if they didn't hand over the Snowden files. What was The Guardian's response? They refused to hand over the files and destroyed them. So, The Guardian is completely and wholly self-regulated. They regulate themselves. They also conduct yearly or annual ethical checks as well to make sure they are doing things that they feel they need to do. It's quite different to the Daily Mail, because as we know, the Daily Mail is a member of IPSO. They are required to pay a membership fee to IPSO and are subject to investigations if a complaint is made against them. As part of its style reporting, the Daily Mail often sees complaints stemming from its use of hyperbole, sensationalism, and personalisation in terms of reporting as well, which is not too surprising considering the fact that the Daily Mail is a mid-market paper. The complainant, so the person who makes the complaint, needs to state which element of the editor's code of practice has been breached. Here are the three elements of the editor's code of conduct. So we have intrusion into grief or shock, privacy, and accuracy. Which one do you think Daily Mail are most often complained about? Accuracy. It is indeed accuracy. Being a tabloid, they're more likely to be sensationalist and hyperbolic in nature, leading to issues with accuracy. Since September 2021, there have been 13 cases brought by individuals groups against the Daily Mail through IPSO. As you can see, they are mostly due to accuracy. Only 2 led to IPSO determining that there had been a breach of the code, and only 1 was resolved, which ended up with Daily Mail paying the complainant an undisclosed sum of money. So, what happens when they are found in breach? Apologies and complaints are usually printed in the box on page 2 of the paper, but there are sometimes exceptions. On 15 December 2017, we can see that there was a front page story regarding compensation granted to an Iraqi man who was wrongly imprisoned and mistreated by British soldiers. In the case of Khan vs Daily Mail, IPSO found that the Daily Mail was in breach of guidelines by publishing inaccurate, misleading or distorted information, and including headlines not supported by text. Significant inaccuracy or misleading statements, not distinguishing clearly between comment and fact. Ipso therefore ordered the Daily Mail to print a front page headline directing readers to a full page article regarding inaccuracies of their news report. So, to wrap up, I consider that you research regulatory complaints against the Daily Mail and the Guardian just to see what has occurred and what is occurring in the case studies we've looked at. So, in this video, we've covered what regulation is, the phone hacking scandal, the Leveson inquiry and the impact of it, Ipso and other regulatory bodies, and regulation of our case studies, the Daily Mail and the Guardian. Why don't you watch our next video on Leveson and Lunt to really understand regulation theory and applying it to our case studies? That's it for today. I hope you solidified your understanding of regulation in the newspaper industry. Thanks ever so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.